everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today for this Women in Digital Forum webinar, Embedding Gender Equality in the Europe Digital Future, from Artificial Intelligence Bias to Actionable Policy Solutions. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Weijie Huang, who is in Netherlands. Weijie works at the Inclusive Artificial Intelligence Lab at Utrecht University, where her research focuses on some of the most urgent questions in digital policy today. Her work looks at the gender digital arms and artificial intelligence safety, platform governance, and how feminist research can be translated into practical policy. She also studies representation, participation, and belonging in gaming cultures, as well as cultural and global south perspectives on artificial intelligence and digital platforms. Her current work in Thematic Working Group 1 is especially relevant to the topic of this webinar. It includes research on deepfake arms and gender artificial intelligence safety in the global south, developed in collaboration with Google safety and security team, as well as work on the gender data report for the future of work. Today, Weijie will give us through three key questions. Why gender bias in artificial intelligence system matters for Europe governance, how we move from identifying bias to governing artificial intelligence more effectively, and which tools can support implementation in practice. This is a timely discussion. As artificial intelligence becomes more embedded in education, work, and public service, these questions are no longer only matter of whether the systems are innovative, but whether they are fair, inclusive, and accountable. Weijie, thank you very much for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I share my slide with you. Okay, thank you very much for this kind of invitation, and I'm really glad to have this opportunity to share my research here, especially at the moment when AI governance in EU is moving from principle to implementation. And at the same time, Women in Digital Declaration is being revisited from the policy commitment to measurable impact. Many of the webinars in this series focus on practical educational work. So today, my presentation today is to look at the structural factors that shape why supporting girls in STEAM is not only an educational issue, but also a long-term governance question, because education doesn't operate in isolation. It's embedded in larger systems, especially in today, of digital governance. So today, I want to focus on one central argumentation, which is gender bias in AI is not a technical problem. It's a governance issue. And if EU AI Act is to protect fundamental rights in practice, gender equality must be embedded across the AI lifecycle, not treated as an afterthought. So, as Ruth have already introduced me, so I'm currently doing my research at Inclusive AI Lab. And today, the presentation draws on two recent research projects. The first is Gender Data Report. And this report is examining how gender bias enters AI systems through data pipelines and why this has become a governance and legitimacy issue for the policymakers. The second is the research on deepfake harms and gender AI safety in the Global South, conducted by Inclusive AI Lab in collaboration with Google safety and security team. This work shows how technology facilitated gender-based harm are not only a technological challenge, but also structural governance failure that requires policy response. So as also Ruth have introduced, this is the three main topics for this webinar. The first is why gender bias in AI system matters. And then I will identify bias to governing AI. Then I will introduce some tools for implementation. So I'm started. Let me briefly explain why this matters specifically in EU at this moment. So Europe does not regulate technology only to promote innovation. It regulated technology to protect rights. So That is the core principle. When AI Act fully applied in August 2026, we are moving from discussion to implementation. And once high-risk AI systems are used in areas like employment, healthcare, migration, education, and other public services, this is no longer about abstract algorithm. It's about how public authorities is operationalized through automated system. So when high-risk AI is used in employment screening, welfare allocation, migration assessment, or education access, decisions are no longer purely administrative. They are mediated by algorithm infrastructure. So this created three concern governance pressures. First is fundamental rights exposure. If bias is embedded upstream in data or model design, it becomes harder to detect within conformable assessment. That increases legal vulnerability under EU foundational rights law. Second is reputational and trust risk. If citizens perceive that automated systems produce structural inequality, compliance with the digital governance weakens. It's not because regulation is absent, but because its failure is contested. The third is regulatory fragmentation risk. If member states interpreted gender safeguard differently in high-risk implementation, we risk divergence in supervisory practice. So there are the reasons why gender bias is a policy issue. So so gender bias in AI is not something that can be fixed with a quick technology update. Much of the research has already shown that it's a systematic features that get built layer by layer across the entire AI system. So let's start it with the data. Think data of the raw material. They are the textbook for which AI learn from. So if that textbook is missing chapters of half of the humanity, or it's filled with stereotypes from our history, then the AI's entire worldview is skewed from day one. So it learns patterns that systematically disadvantaged women. Then we move to the model stage. So developers simplified complex human realities into measurable variables. So many human qualities such as leadership, reliability, collaboration, or judgment are complex and context dependent. But the AI system try to translate them into measurable indicators. For example, instead of accessing real leadership capacity, a model meant to reduce it to something easier to measure. For example, like years in the management role or numbers of directly reports, this proxy becomes a reality. So once deployed, AI systems are embedded in institutional logic, including performance metrics, efficiency targeted, and engagement optimizations. Many systems are optimized for measurable output, including speed, scale, engagement, and cost reduction. And those optimization goals can unintentionally reinforce existing inequality. Finally, too often the governance is weak. And in a world built with historical inequality, a neutral rule simply maintains a steer call. It fails to catch bias because it wasn't designed to look at it. So when we look at the full picture, we see it's a chain reaction. This chain does not just create bias technology, it created a system that shapes who gets the opportunity and who gets left out. And let me now move to the concept of gender data gap. So this research draws on the gender data report that I co-authored with my supervisor at the end of 2024. In this report, we examine a very simple but a powerful question. If data is the foundation of AI system, what happens when that data does not adequately represent women? And historically, much of the data around the world has been built on white male as the default. Take medical data as an example. Women's heart attack symptoms often differ from men's. According to recent research, the organized model was trained primarily on the white male central data. As a result, women, especially women from minority background, are more likely to be misdiagnosed. So this isn't intentionally discrimination, but it is an inherent bias built into the data. The second problem is intersectionality. It is not only about women as a category, it is about which women are represented. For example, many large-scale data sets used to train facial recognition systems contain disproportionately high numbers of light-skinned male faces. Women in color are often underrepresented in training data. The result is predictable, high error rates for those who were statistically marginalized in the data. This is not just about technological failure. It is reflect how social hierarchies become encoded in data compositions. So third is structure absence. Sometimes women are not misrepresented. They simply penalized because their life trajectories do not match the assumed norm. Taking AI, assistant recruitment system as an example. Recruitment system trained on male career trajectories may interpret caregiving gaps for women as lower productivity. The system doesn't understand the context, so inequalities become automatically. And finally, we have policy-level blind spot. According to UN Women, around 80% of gender-related sustainability development goals indicators lack complete data globally. That means many forms of inequality are simply not measured. We don't collect data on unpaid care works, digital access gaps, or informal labors or gender-based violence. So those inequalities do not disappear. They just fall outside the policy radar. When AI systems are built on those incomplete data sets, they inherited those blind spots. Across those layers, we see a pattern. When women are missing, misrepresented, or misunderstood in the data, inequality becomes automatically. And once they become automatically, it becomes harder to see and harder to context in the system. I will take the example as technology-facilitated gender-based violence to explain. UN Women defined it as any act committed or amplified through digital technologies that result in physical, psychological, political, or economic harm. And one of the most alarming forms is non-consensual synthetic intimacy imagery. In another word is deepfake pornographies. Last year, our team at Inclusive AI Lab collaborated with Google's safety and security team on a project called the Gender AI Safety Initials. The focus was to understand how deepfake-related harms are experienced by girls and women in the global south, from a social, culture, and lived experience perspective. In the project, I focused specifically on policy and media analysis. I was look at how deepfake harm are discussed, framed, and regulated across different countries. So last month, I have attended EU academic discussion on deepfake AI. I found that much of the debate is focused on political disinformation, election, democracy, geopolitical risk. And of course, those issues are important, but statistically, as what you see on the screen, it is not where the majority deepfake harm is happening. So I hope you see in reality that the largest impact of the deepfakes today is gendered violence. And this is not limited to one specific region, but globally. Yet policy debates often prioritize geopolitics risk over structural gender harms. So this gap between statistical reality and regulatory focus is itself a governance issue. And before I move into the okay, so let's take a close look at why women are particularly vulnerable in the deepfake system. We need to stop thinking the deepfake isolation incident. Instead, I want to offer you a way to seeing this as a system. So we first started with production, and we will ask questions here: who designed those tools? The AI sector, as we know, have massive gender imbalance. In 2024, women represent only around 19% of ICT specialists in EU, and that number has increased only marginalized over last decades. So when technological power is concentrated in male-dominant space, it shapes what problem gets solved and what risk gets ignored. So safety features that could protect women from digital harms and abuse are not a priority. They are structure overlooked from the beginning. And second is amplification, is where the technology meets the platforms. Once a deepfake is created, it is the algorithm that decided whether it goes vanish or goes viral. Because Algorithms are designed to optimize for engagement, such as clicks, views, and shares on the platforms, and the profit often comes before the protection. The content is more shocking and it more spreads. For the platforms, they profit from this kind of circulation, and this is where the governance is weak and the liability is unclear. So it actually accelerated the disproportionately towards women. And then we will talk about commodification. This is the stage we don't talk about enough. Women's digital identity, including their faces and their bodies, are treated as data assets. Synthetic sexual and content is profitable at many levels. There are markets for it and platforms that benefit from hosting it. The digital economy had found its way to extract value from women's body all over again. Gendered harm became a business model. So when we analyze production, amplification, and commodification together, a pattern becomes clear. Gendered harm is not accident. It is embedded in design choice, platform incentive, and economic models. So if governance intervene only at the content level, such as content moderation, it's already too late because harm is circulated. And lifecycle governance must intervene upstream. Before I move into comparative overview, just one clarification here. This analysis is based on policy document, government report, and academic literature and media discourse collected between January and April 2025. The purpose here is not to provide a real-time legislative intervention, but to identify structural governance patterns in how gender digital harm are framed or not framed across the jurisdiction. So started with EU. The AI Act and the Digital Service Act provide framework to risk-based oversight and content moderation, but they are mainly designed around quantifiable risk. Complex how to measure social harm, such as technology-facilitated gender-based violence, often go unnoticed. Compliance requirements also tend to favor large tech companies because they have the resources to navigate them, leaving systematic harm under-addressed. In the United States, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act focuses on protecting free speech and regulating criminal content. While important, it also shields platforms from liability. The result is weak accountability for gendered harm, which are largely treated as private safety issues rather than structural governance problem. So when we look at China, they have deep synthesis regulation mandatory pre-publication review for synthetic media. Non-consensual synthetic intimacy imagery harm are explicitly prohibited, but enforcement prioritizes public order and stability rather than gender justice. So gender harm are technologically illegal, but gender equality isn't central to enforcement. And finally, in many parts of the global south, this gap are even bigger. Legal definitions are often missing or vague. For example, in India, there's no clear definition of deepfake. And in South Africa, the cybercrime law has very narrow definition of technological facilitated gender-based violence. In Mexico, they have Leo Olympia law, but the cultural bias and limited support means that the vast majority of the cases are often go under report. So AI systems travel globally, including those designed, regulated, or funded in Europe. But the assumptions embedded in them do not travel neutrally because they carry social norms, economic priority, and cultural default. Many widely used AI models are trained on datasets that overrepresented Western male and urban experience. As a result, their assumptions about how people live and behave do not travel neutral across context. If EU wants to embed gender equality meaningfully in AI governance, it must recognize that bias is structurally globally, and that EU regulation has global effect. Embedding gender equality is therefore not only about internal compliance. It's about understanding how EU governance interact with global data flow and infrastructures. Let me show this through 4 areas. First is we have talked about who is visible in AI dataset. Most global datasets underrepresented women outside Western context. In Senegal, for example, Marianne Yammer's I Am the Code Foundation trains girls to code and curate their own dataset. This movement had very concrete goals by 2030 to train 1 million girls and young women in Africa in coding and digital skill. Not only technology literacy, but abilities to actively participate in shaping the digital future. Today, I Am the Code Foundation is closely working with government, companies, and NGOs in Africa. It provides coding education, mentorship, and digital training to tens of thousands of girls. And these girls are becoming producers of data, designers of systems, and contributors to digital infrastructure to future Africa. This action is simple but powerful. They make themselves visible in the data layer. This directly challenges the minimum bias we discussed earlier. These kind of initiatives matter for Europe as well, because many global AI datasets use Western companies are trained on data that exclude large part of the world. And secondly, we have talked about how model interpreted life. Bias don't stop at data. It compounds across the AI lifecycle. Many standard algorithms assume one-size-fits-all models of human behaviors, often based on Western context. This can unintentionally exclude people whose lives don't fit those assumptions. For example, consider financial platform in emerging market in the global south. Many women lack formal banking history, so traditional credit scoring models automatically exclude them. Some digital financial platforms aim at improving access to credit for underserved population, such as a go-to platform in Indonesia. They have adopted by using alternative indicators, such as participation in community activities, frequencies of small purchases, or other everyday patterns to assess creditworthiness. In this way, they translated social and community engagement into financial access, rather than forcing the users to fit a pre-existing models. This raises an important question for European regulations. Are our fairness standards flexible enough to account for different realities, or do they assume one dominant model for life? So third, we talk about how to make invisible harm measurable. In many countries, technology facilitated gender-based violence is diffuse and hard to capture, and legal systems often struggle to address it. Take Pakistan as an example. Online gender-based violence is a highly visible reality shaped by entrenched patriarchy norms, limited legal protections, and widespread social barriers to reporting and justice. To respond, a feminist civil society organization called the Digital Rights Foundation set up a cyber harassment helpline in 2016. It provides confidential legal, technological, and psychological support and has documented over 20,000 cases, but it didn't stop there. The organization turned this data into policy-relevant evidence, identifying patterns of harms and engage with law enforcement and policymakers. The key function here is knowledge production. They turned lived harm into regulatory evidence. This example shows that meritable is not impossible. It requires institutional commitment. And finally, we're talking about preparing institutional process through situated practice. Even where law exists on paper, the way produced are structured and also can intentionally re-traumatize the victim. This is especially true for survivors of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. For example, in parts of Latin America, where gender-based digital harm are legally recognized, but legal systems often lack of the tools or workflows to handle those sensitively. In response to this gap, initiatives like AI has emerged. AI worked with courts in Argentina and Mexico to bridge the gap between complex legal procedures and the lived realities of the survivors. It takes cases recorded and anonymized to protect victim privacy and dignity. The lesson here is that we often look to good governance is not only about having the right law in place. It's about how systems operate in practice, how people move through process, how information is structured, and whether the institutions are designed to preserve dignity as well as compliance. What those examples show that addressing gender bias requires intervention at multiple levels: data practice, platform incentives, evidence building, and institutional design. These goals examples illustrated that assumptions embedded in AI systems can produce inequality far beyond their countries of origin. For European policymakers, this means that AI regulation is not just about local deployment. It must account for how systems trained elsewhere impact fairness and rights within the EU. Now, to make those insights actionable, at Inclusive AI Lab, we deployed a practical framework called the Gender AI Safety Framework. This framework combined empirical studies on gendered AI harms, including deepfake, data bias, and platform governance, with the lessons from the global case studies. You can think of it as a roadmap. This is not just about managing risk, but actively build inclusive, just, and empowering AI. So first is the input layer, the foundation. This is where the alliance and the collective right lives. The idea here is simple. You cannot build safe AI in isolation. We need strong networks that bring together civil society, feminist researchers, technologists, and policymakers. And we need rules and governance structure that protect the group, not just individuals. This ensures that AI starts from the foundation of fairness and collective accountability. Next is produce layer, transformation and practice. Here we have beta testing and design justice. Beta testing is about grounding AI in lived experience. Instead of assumptions, we test policies, systems, and models with real communities, especially those who are most affected. Design justice asks who is building AI, who benefits, and who bears the risk. By centering marginalized users, we can redesign systems so that they don't just reflect existing hierarchies, but actively disrupt them. So finally, we have our purpose layer is empowerment, because AI is not created about risk migrations. It's about agency. It will provide us the tools, digital literacies, and survival-centered reporting system, and space for the feminist tech innovations. This is where communities gain the ability to act, to participate, and to shape the AI that affect their lives. Empower communities feed the insight and data back into the foundation layer, created a continuous cycle of improvement. It is not linear, it's iterative, relational, and dynamic. In short, this framework translates this analysis into governance structure. It connected foundations, process, and purpose. So this is not about risk management alone, it's a structure redesign. The framework is not proposing a new regulatory regime. It is about operationalizing gender equality within existing AI governance structure, particularly along the AI lifecycle. In other words, the question is not, do we need more regulation, but how do we make existing mechanism gender responsive? So the first mechanism is gender equality assessment, embedded at the ex-ante stage of system design and conformity assessment. So it can be integrated into existing fundamental rights impact assessment under the AI Act. You can think it as a health check before the system goes live. It asks a simple question. Are women and other marginalized groups adequately represented in the data and design choice? Because once the system is trained and deployed, structure bias become costly and difficult to correct. Ex-ante intervention prevent bias from the scaling. The second mechanism operates as the ex-post stage, post-market monitoring and accountability. This includes stress testing system prior to the deployment to anticipate differential impact patterns. Even a well-designed system can generate new bias over time. So the AI Act already requires post-market monitoring for high-risk systems. The critical question here is whether gender disaggregated harms reporting is embedded in those monitoring structure. Embedding gender equality requires both ends. Without ex-ante assessment, bias scale. Without ex-post oversight, harms accumulated. And if the women in digital agenda is to move beyond declaration, those mechanisms cannot remain voluntary. They need to be operationalized within the existing conformity assessment and monitoring structures under the AI Act. So finally, I want to highlight the roles of Thematic Working Group 1. Our work focuses on creating long-term intervention in schools to encourage girls to pursue STEAM subjects. The idea is simple but powerful. If we want future digital and AI systems to become more inclusive, we need to start by shaping who enter those fields in the first place. By promoting girls in STEAM, it challenged the concentration of technology knowledge in male-dominant space. At the same time, it cultivated what we call as future data steward, young people who will understand how bias emerge, how to spot gaps in the knowledge, and how to ensure fairness in the system they later worked with, whether in technology, research, or governance. It bridges the gap between education policy and long-term social change, giving girls the skills and confidence to become leaders, innovators, and active shape the digital futures. The idea of classroom evidence lab discussed in the working group is particularly important here. So if we want governance to be evidence-based, we also need to understand what is happened inside the classroom, who participates, who withdraws, who gains the confidence, and who lost it. The macro-level evidence feed directly into long-term structure change. So for me, this work is far beyond classroom. Supporting goals in STEAM isn't just about education. It's about upstream governance intervention. When technology knowledge stays concentrated in male hands, bias keep getting built into the system we rely on. By expanding who learns to create the technology, we actually change how technology is made. In this sense, investing in girls' education isn't separate from AI governance. So it's a key part of building the digital EU and reflect its own value of equality and inclusion. So thank you. I think I'm finished here.
Thank you very much, Weijie. Do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe we can stop sharing the screen very well.
Yes.
And I'm going to check the chat, and if there is any question, please feel free to open the micro and talk or raise your hand. Yes? No? We have, Tohu, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Weijie, for the amazing presentation. It's quite good. I've got a few questions. I'm Toju. I lead AI and responsible AI. I'm currently based in Dublin, and I've been working. I'm ex-Google, so I worked at Google and was at the forefront of the technology many years ago. So I'm quite excited to see more work being done on this topic. It's so relevant, and we know how we have faced gender issues over the years, and now it's being presented in AI and in the technology. And I'd love to see more action towards this work. So the research is great. I love the work that you do with the AI Inclusive Lab. It will be great to understand your view on recommendations and how we can actually implement this in the EU, considering that the big tech providers all come from the US, and the EU is playing catch up really when it comes to AI and AI startups. So assuming this gets into the EU AI Act, how do we implement this sort of framework across leading AI providers if most of them are based in the US?
Yes, I think this is very important question, and thank you for asking it. And we also, in Inclusive AI Lab, we also want to do this kind of work. So in this June, at Utrecht, we will hold this data care workshop, and we will invite feminist initials across the world into our workshop. And we also cooperated with a project which is in the US. And this woman is brilliant, Yang Sina. She have built this platform, and she have interviewed more than 100 women leaders across the globe. And in technology. So she have asked what they need. So we have already created this conversation, and she will share her report with us. And we will, I think it's on 10 June. If you are interested, you can follow Inclusive Lab. We are now circulated of this event, and we want to build the relationship and connections with feminist AI group all over the world, especially from Global South, because we understand because the data is trained by in the US and the EU, and so basically there's a large data was absent in the data set, and we want to create it a data set focused in the global south. So we're trying to contribute to this, and we're also discussing there, and we have some very excited things in that workshop. If you are interested, I welcome you in Utrecht in June. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn and we'll take it up from there.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we have another question from Christel Wilders. Please, whenever you want.
Hello, I'm from Belgium and I'm working on the Women in Digital strategy, which is a national strategy to close the digital gender gap. But on AI, are you sharing the concern that if we go to policy, that we see a very big backlash, especially now coming from the US, as the politicians are like banning equal opportunities, are banning the fact that companies have equal policy plans, and I am very concerned. And how can we tackle it, as other systems and a lot of the data are still coming from the US, where women are really putting back in the row. I believe that there is a counter. Women are trying in the US to go against it, but the influence of the policy is now so big in banning all feminist actions and feminist policy.
Thank you, Crystal. I think can you repeat your question again?
So I'm worried that, I will make it short, I'm very worried about the fact that now in the US policy, in the national policy, they're going back on feminist issues. There are rules that companies are not allowed anymore to have equal policy plans in companies, and as AI now is really coming from US and the big companies and the data, how can we tackle this evolution? Is it not going to influence more the digital gap, the digital gender gap, also in data?
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. I think this is very important question. As I have in my presentation, I'm talking about gender data gap. Like it's a huge gap about gender in the data set. So now, I mean, it is the fact that the company have the right to train their models using their data, but we also need the laws and regulations on. We have to integrate the gender data into the data set, and should be included in the AI regulation. And this is why I said like we need the gender assessment, and this is not just about company. I think women, like especially for the feminist AI researchers, that we have the ability to do more research on it and to looking into the gap. And I think there are a lot of work on it, especially in the global south, because people now realize that the companies have too much, and there are too much gaps in their data set. And there are a lot of projects already ongoing in Africa and in Latin America, and also in some part of Asia. And there are a lot of people are working in this area, as my paper wrote. So I think for me, I feel like the regulation is one thing, and the other thing is we need people who use the AI system to understand the gaps. So this is why we're doing this project to encourage women and girls in the STEAM and also in the industry. So only more and more people realize this is a problem. So then we have the more space and argumentations to gain back our rights in the data set. So this is not, I know this is a problem and it's really a huge problem, but this is not something can really be adjusted in very short time. So it's a long time work, and maybe it may need like a generation. I don't know if that can answer your question, but it's like a working together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Women all over the world, they get united and they tackle the problem.
Yes.
But still the situation now is worrying me personally, as a woman seeing what's going on in the world. But thank you very much for doing this great job and your paper.
Thank you. I mean, like we can do something smaller, like encourage the girls to learn more technology around us. I'm now doing this on my side. I'm also writing some articles in Chinese to circulate it on my social media, like to encourage girls to learn, or at least to tell them what is happening. I think it's like if more people understand the situation, they will influence lives by the big tech company. So we will unite more women in this area. And I think at least, I think we are doing this at this moment.
Yes, we are doing it in Belgium also through this Women in Digital strategy. One of the objectives is having more girls and women in STEM and in ICT studies so they can get on the labor market. So we are working on it.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for your intervention and for your question. And now, Alexandra Chirico, please, the floor is yours. Alexander?
Yes,
Chirico?
sorry, I need to enable my microphone and my camera. Hi, thanks a lot for your presentation and for this occasion. I have a question which point at a sort of incongruence as far as I can see it, because I do agree, starting with data could be heavily compromised or biased when it comes to gender equality. And then we need to recognize that it's not the fault of data, but it's the fault of human beings and human beings' perception. Okay. But then organization and plenty of different users work with those data. How can you reconcile the mitigation of the risks on gender equality without interfering with the protection of those data, which is another quintessential principle that we need to respect? So I see it very difficult. And also when it comes to the regulatory framework we have, it's not only AI Act, but also many other different measures regulating the action of different stakeholders and actors in the market. So on the one side, biases, on the other side, data protection.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think it's very important. And because my study on deepfake, it shows that there are a lot of privacy, especially for the victims. So we can so basically so we need to situate it the knowledge. For example, in the specific context, women understand what they face, so they understand their problems, and they understand who to protect and what to protect. So we need people, we need people or women to have those kind of knowledge, and those lived experience could only through the research, not just assumption from other different culture, and this is kind of knowledge. And the other thing is, we need to understand different situation, and people have the ability to adjust the for enforcement based on their knowledge, and AI can actually doing both, because as the case I present here in the Latin American, the MU AI is used as it's used as protection and help in the law enforcement, and it anonymized the victims' privacy. But at the same time, they analyze the patterns of violence. So you can see this case can provide different things. On the one hand, it collects data. On the other hand, if we designed model properly, it can protect the victims. So it depends on different cases, different situations. And I think the humanity, we are not lacking about to create the technology. It's just when we created this technology, we need to ask the question, who this technology is protect. So if we designed a technology based on this kind of foundation, then probably we will have the technology which is protect the vulnerability. So it's different, yeah.
No, so if I understand correctly, you just said that we can have also AI for good. So also with respect to this situation we are discussing today, it's true that AI can amplify biases, but it could also be employed for good, no?
Yes.
To correct.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Alexandra. Do we have any other question from the audience that you, or any comments? No? I would like to pick, Weijie, one of your questions, and broadly general, if we link your recommendations to the new thematic working group 6, women shaping the artificial intelligence economy, what do we need to do to help women not only be affected by artificial intelligence, but also shape artificial intelligence jobs, skills, and governance, in your opinion?
I think it is the agency. I think agency is very important. So this is because when you realize you have the ability to do something good and to exercise what is your ability, you probably have more willingness to contribute to this world and also in this technology. I think most of the time when we see the new technology, women are normally the marginalized, and they're not willing to do much because of the marginalization. So if we really want them to be included and we want this technology to be more inclusive, we need to give women more agency in this technology. So they have the ability to design by themselves, and they have ability to know how to use it, not just the force to use it. So, and most of the time we are more like forced to use something rather than I want to do something as my own. So I think it's different things. So now, yeah, I think why we are doing this thematic working group is in that sense, we want to encourage girls to understand if they know this technology, maybe they have some abilities to create their own future. So yeah, I think this is very important because I'm also writing another article about gender and apps design. So if we are not thinking for ourselves and more women in the future, and we just because if we're not doing in that way, and then we will find in the future, maybe the AI system will be more oppressive for women. So yes, we have to do something at this moment, and I think education is very important at this moment. Although a lot of people are saying that because of AI is so populated in the young peoples, and maybe they don't need university. I'm not agree with that. I think university isn't just tell them how to use the technology, but to tell them what is this of this technology? Why this kind of technology? How they make the decision and why they make this kind of decision? So we need to explain about the intentions behind the creation. So they need to have this kind of education to help them in the future to ask more questions. It is for the humanity. It is not for personal. Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned the need to prepare future data professionals for who understand the structural bias. So, what can schools and education system do in practice regarding to this?
For me, I feel like probably we need to change a little bit in the future for the education, because knowledge is very easy to access now. So the difference is what kind of the education you could access through the technology. So maybe the technology is making decisions, what kind of knowledge you are access to. But yeah, so I think it's kind of different things, but because I'm not in the educational background, and yeah, so I probably not, yeah. But my expectation is that people have the education and they understand how this technology is become and will become.
This is a very important
so they can make their own choice.
Yeah, this is very important point, and I will say thank you very much, Weijie, for sharing your knowledge and reflections with us today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think it has been a very valuable discussion, and it gives us a lot of reflect on how to build a more fair and inclusive artificial intelligence future. And with this, we will close the webinar here. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Okay.